Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Kauffman Corner. With us, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, co-writers of Rob and Rany on the Royals, and of course, the author of Rany on the Royals, also writing for Grantland, The Athletic, various other, what would you say, established publishing outlets that are out there. If you have a way to publish Rany's thoughts on the Royals, he will give you great thoughts on them. It's what he does every week with us here on the Kauffman Corner. Soren Petro with you as well from Sports Radio 810 WHB here in Kansas City. I guess they're in Kansas City. Regular viewers of the Kauffman Corner stream, if you catch us via the podcast later in the week, thank you. But you can also catch the stream as well. I'm on the road, so playing from the vacation. I don't know how much, as like my wife and kids are like, instead of being another floor up or two up and over at home, they're like right on the other side of this wall. So they may have never heard the Kauffman Corner podcast, but they're going to hear it tonight as we're on vacation here in Florida. But a lot to get to, Randy. We're going to talk about the Andrew Benintendi trade, talk about the trade deadline that's still looming. Drew Waters playing pretty damn well. Brady Singer blowing people away. But the Royals salvage one from the Yankees and do it with thunderous bats. Your thoughts, first of all, on this series with the New York Yankees?
Well, they do it with specifically a big hit from Salvador Perez in the ninth inning, and that's, I think, the second time this season that a potentially devastating week of losses was at least partially healed by Salvador Perez's magical healing powers. You may remember the Royals nearly blew a 6-0 lead in Colorado a couple months back, mid-May, and were losing 7-6 in the ninth inning, and Salvador Perez managed to salvage the last game of that series. But it didn't save Terry Bradshaw's job as hitting coach because he got fired the next day. So today the Royals were one inning away from being swept by the Yankees, managed to pull it out because Salvador Perez is, not human. And the Royals managed to win one game against the Yankees this year, as opposed to 2 last year and 2 the year before that. And they haven't had a winning record against the Yankees since 2014. In fact, they are 11-30 since winning the World Series against the New York Yankees. And I think that kind of just sums up the futility that this organization has against really good organizations over the last few years.
It does. And I'm going to tell you that, we've been running a stat on how the Royals are doing. And, the Royals have spent a lot of time, and I think it's accurate. Playing good baseball is playing good baseball. But they've had a stat talking about how they've been around 500 for 40 games, and they have. I think they've dipped below that. They were 1 or 2 above at one point, maybe 3 above. At one point, they've dipped below that. I ran the numbers, and I was talking with some people in the organization. I said, listen, I agree. I mean, if you're playing good ball, you're playing good ball, and playing 500 baseball is important. I had initially thought that they were just pounding away on bad teams and getting crushed by the good teams. Now, some of this is that stat's always changing. A team that's 1 over 500, you run those numbers again 10 days later. Now they're 2 below 500, so they go to the other side of the ledger. But the Royals were like 1 game below 500 against teams that were above 500, and they were 1 game above against it before the Yankee series, right? Before the Yankee series. So now that they're sliding down a little bit, but that is the measuring stick, right? Like we talk about it all the time on our show. Good teams don't pummel other good teams. Good teams play kind of 500 baseball. The great teams, you're going to win 105 games. You're going to have a winning record even against winning teams. But for the most part, winning teams kind of go 500 against each other, and then they just obliterate the bad teams. And I think they're playing better baseball now, for sure. But I think the reality is that this club still has a ways to go, right? You measure yourselves against these better teams, and these are some series here against the Yankees, against the White Sox, where you can say, okay, are they ready to contend? And that is not the case. By the way, I saw the comment about an echo on Rany. That's on my end. That's my bad. Just getting some of the stuff out. I don't have all the computer power that I normally have when I'm on the road. So I wasn't sure if that was bleeding over. It was, and so I've shut it off. So we'll get some of the retweets out a little bit later on. But so if anyone's still hearing an echo on Rany, let me know. But there shouldn't be. I've shut everything down, so I apologize for that. And if that came across on the podcast, that's what it was. We'll see where it is. But again, a little bit out of fish out of water right now for how I'm trying to pull this off.
Kind of like the Royals every time they play in Yankee Stadium. So
yes, exactly. It's exactly like that. All right, so yeah, there's work to be done, no doubt, for the Kansas City Royals. But they did get some work done as far as building their ball club. And Andrew Benintendi has long been said everybody felt like he was going to get traded. He did get traded. Are you satisfied with the returns the Royals got?
Satisfied. That's a low bar. I guess I would say we clear that low bar. I'm satisfied with it. I'm certainly not thrilled with the trade. I think from a pure talent standpoint, it was probably in the ballpark of what they should have gotten for a guy who is a good hitter, a good contributor, valuable guy, but not a star player, not one of the prizes of this trading deadline. When we just saw Luis Castillo get traded from the Reds to the Mariners, that's the kind of player that's going to bring back massive amount of talent. Two top 100 prospects, and of course Castillo's under contract for another season, and Benintendi's under contract for 2 months. Who knows what they could have gotten for 4 months of Andrew Benintendi, as we talked about back in May when it was clear the Royals weren't going anywhere, but the Royals didn't do that. The issue I have with it is simply the kind of talent they got. And of course, by that, I mean, they got 3 pitchers, and that's not the fault of the pitchers. That's not the fault of the talent that they acquired, but this is an organization that is woefully unprepared to develop pitchers. And so even if on paper the talent that they got is, an adequate return for Andrew Benintendi, the odds that those 3 pitchers are going to actually amount to something valuable in Kansas City, as the organization is construed right now, I would have to say is fairly low, because they cannot develop pitchers. I mean, let's think of it this way: the 3 guys they got, right? They got TJ Sakema, they got Beck Way, they got Chandler Champlin. Yeah, Chandler Champlin, and then Andrew Hoffman was one of the 2 guys they got in the trade for their draft pick along with Drew Waters. All 4 of those guys, none of those guys being elite or even like top 15 prospects in their previous organizations. I think all 4 of those guys rank among the Royals' 7 or 8 best pitching prospects right now. I mean, they just do. They join an organization that is so bereft of pitching talent, or at least developed pitchers, that, I mean, you'll put Caderna up there. You could put, probably Jonathan Bolin up there. I guess you have to put Mazzucato up there at this point. Beyond that, I'm not sure who else in the organization I would definitely put above, certainly above Sakema and Beck Way, who are the two best guys in that trade, or Andrew Hoffman. Maybe Noah Cameron. Maybe Drew Parrish, although I'm not sure about that. I mean, these are, you start getting into names that the average Royals fan is just not aware of. I think these guys could develop, but I think they're probably going to be good relievers, as I think a reasonable expectation for what they could be. I think there's hope that Beck Way could be a mid-rotation starter. Sakema's the left-hander out of Mizzou with the kind of a funky delivery, and he has had a lot of trouble staying healthy since he was drafted. Is finally healthy now, and his numbers, I mean, again, better than basically any member of the Royals organization this year. He's got 9 walks in 54 strikeouts in high A ball for the Yankees before the trade. That's better than basically any pitcher in the Royals organization this year. And so I think Sakema, at the very least, would probably make a good reliever, good left-handed reliever. But is that an adequate return for Benintendi? Adequate, yes. Is it something we're going to be excited about in the long run? Probably not.
Yeah, so I'm a little more bullish on it because they are all strike throwers. They are all guys that, at least right now, are getting the swing and miss. They're all, me, I'm always dinging everything on the age side of things. None of them are young for their level, right? And they all are getting pushed a level. At least 2 of the 3, I know, the plan was to push them a level when they came over. But these are the kind of guys that I think you want. And yes, would I have liked more? I would have liked more. I think I've got a little bit more optimism for Sycamore. I think to me, we can't fault them for not doing what the Rays do and having different looks. And then they go out and get a guy who's a different look, and we go, well, but he's not good
Yeah,
enough.
no, I agree. I like Sycamore, and I like the fact that he's funky. I like funky pitchers. I've always had a weakness for that.
Yeah. And by the way, but the other aspect of it is I think that Andrew Benintendi's not worth a lot, folks. Like, I mean, like what do you're talking about a guy who does not hit the ball over the wall? So like, what do we think that we're going to see, them get for Andrew Benintendi? I mean, you're talking about a guy who's Curtis had the stat before I left town on Thursday that in the last 26 games, Andrew Benintendi had 3 extra base hits, and they were all doubles. They weren't home runs. They weren't triples. They were all doubles. I mean, Andrew Benintendi is to me, I don't know if I said this on one of our podcasts. I know I've said it on my radio show, but, he's David DeJesus. He's a guy that when you're sitting there going, we've got a hole in the outfield, and we got a chance to win, you go, I want that on-base percentage. And that guy will play a competent outfield. I want that guy. And then the minute you get to spring training and you're thinking about what you want your ball club ultimately to be, right? And you're thinking, and everyone's vision is, what's our perfect ball club? At that point, you go, we got to have somebody better than this, right? Championship clubs, not the Royals. And that's not to demean what he is. He's a good player. But, he's increased his slug by like 40 points this year. Paid for every penny of it increased his on-base percentage by like 40 points and paid for every cent of it with his slug. I mean, it looks like it's a clearly a concentrated effort to drive up the on-base, to increase his value. But I think we're going to see like what his value is when we see the contract he gets. I've talked to people around baseball, like the Whit Merrifield. I'm like, hey, Whit, the Royals could have traded him. He goes, yeah, I hear that a lot, but what does everybody think they were going to get for Whit Merrifield? He doesn't hit the ball over the wall. His on-base isn't particularly good. Like this idea that Whit Merrifield was bringing 3 top-end prospects, or that Whit Merrifield was the equal to Jose Altuve at one point, is just not the case. And by the way, the Astros didn't get Altuve traded when they were in the middle of their complete teardown. Now, there's all kinds of stories about, no, they wanted to build around him. There's ideas. But my point simply is, I don't know that the game value, we're talking about a guy who has no contract for next year. And I don't know that anybody in the industry values a guy that doesn't hit the ball over the wall at all.
Yeah, I mean, the David DeJesus comparison, that's interesting. I think Benintendi, just because he does have a history of hitting for power. I mean, even just last year, he had like 17 home runs. I think maybe it's looked at a little bit better than DeJesus, but it's a close call. Partly, I think that's a reflection of how underrated David DeJesus was. I think he was a really good player. And you make that point that, yes, when you have a hole, he's perfect. When you go into spring training, maybe he's not. But we're not in spring training right now. We have a hole part of the season. We're in July, when teams that have a hole don't have any way of fixing that hole before the playoffs other than on the trade market. So this is the time you would think that there would be, he's going to have more value right now, a 320 hitting guy with little power, but who can, decent defense. Okay, the Gold Glove is probably not an accurate reflection of his defensive ability, but he's at least an average, probably slightly above average defender. And I mean, again, 320 batting average with walks, 390 OBP in 2022 is an incredibly valuable commodity. And, when you think about how many teams are contenders, because there are more playoff teams than ever, which means more potential teams that are going to the playoffs but have a hole in left field, you would just think the more playoff teams you add, the more teams are looking for talent, the fewer teams are selling, because teams that previously, if you're a little under 500 at this point in the season, you in the past might have been a seller, and now you're not selling because you're only 4 games out of a playoff spot. So I think the entire dynamic, buyer-seller dynamic at the trade deadline, now that they've added 2 more playoff teams, is weighted towards the seller. So that does, also potentially increases value. If the Yankees weren't interested, there are half a dozen other teams that were at least rumored to have some interest in Benintendi. So again, I'm not saying that it was a bad trade. This might have been the best they could do. Maybe they could have waited another couple of days and seen if somebody got desperate. I do like the pitchers that they got, even if they are not among the 4 or 5 best pitching prospects in the Yankees organization. But I am worried about the Royals, rendering it all moot because they can't develop pitchers. I mean, just as an example, Andrew Hoffman, who was the guy they got with Drew Waters, and who had terrific numbers before the trade, in 80 innings in the Braves organization this year, he had 21 walks and 90 strikeouts. All right, and I think he pitched today. He was
Drum roll,
start.
please.
Yeah, so the drum roll. Well, now in fairness, he was promoted to Double A, so that plays a part here, right? But in 3 Double A starts, 14 innings, he already has 8 walks against 9 strikeouts. Forget the strikeout rate. 8 walks in 14 innings after 21 walks in 80 innings. His walk rate has more than doubled in 3 starts. Okay, only 3 starts, but walks is the one bugaboo that permeates the entire organization, from the major leagues, where they lead the American League in walks allowed, to all of their minor league affiliates. And lo and behold, they get a guy and he's already struggling to throw strikes. So that's why I'm nervous here, not because of the players, but because of the organization that's developing those players
now. And listen, I said this particularly about the 3 Yankees. One of the things that we heard from JJ Piccolo in the press conference to announce the trade was, these guys are strike throwers. They should move quickly. I said, okay, and I like that. I like that you got, that's your view of it. And I'm with you. I saw relievers mostly out of what these guys are going to be, but you need relievers. And I'm like, okay, if they're striking guys out there, hopefully power relievers. But I said, undeniably, unquestionably, if they come to this organization and are no longer strike throwers, the problem is you, man. The problem is the Royals. And I think that's one thing that this trade hopefully will do, if indeed that they go that route, is it will make it as if it wasn't already absolutely a certainty, but make it an absolute certainty that the problem lies within your organization and changes have to come to the pitching side, right? That's at least the one thing that will come of this. Is there's no way to be like, well, so-and-so had an injury and this guy we moved pretty fast, and no. These guys were throwing strikes elsewhere. They came to you. They can't throw strikes anymore. So whatever you sit them down and do, it ain't working.
Speaking of Yankee pitchers and walks, the 3 guys that the Royals got, we talked about, they might end up being relievers. Let's say they turn into good relievers in the end. That might be a win for 2 months of Andrew Benintendi. You turn a guy into a decent relief, or, let's say a 7th inning relief guy, that you have club control of for several years. That sounds like, maybe a decent trade overall. The problem is the Royals had a guy that they had traded for, who they then let go, literally waived, was claimed by the New York Yankees. So the Royals, with one of the worst records in baseball, released a guy, waived, put him on, designated for assignment. So his contract is available to be acquired by any other team. And the team that put the claim in is a team on its way to winning 100 games. And of course, I am referring to Albert Abreu. Mm-hmm. And speaking of pitchers and walks and the Royals' inability to teach command. So Albert Abreu was acquired by the Royals in a trade on June the 3rd. The Royals gave up a prospect, not an elite prospect, but a real prospect, a guy by the name of Yohannes Morel. We had previously, we've talked about how when the Royals make trades, they always seem to go for guys who are close to the majors and never go after like the young 18-year-old in the complex league who might be nothing, but might have an upside better than, a guy that's closer to the majors. Yohannes Morel is actually the exception that proves the rule, because he's the one guy the Royals have acquired the last few years in a trade. In the Kelvin Herrera deal, the Royals acquired 3 players. I betting you won't be able to remember the other 2, and it's through no fault of your own because they're very forgettable. Kelvin Gutierrez, you may remember him, played, yeah. And then Blake Perkins, who was a center field prospect, kind of a potential Gerard Dyson type that never panned out. Yohannes Morel was the 18-year-old pitcher, armed just over from Latin America, who could literally have turned into anything. And he still hasn't developed. But the thing about trading for an 18-year-old guy is 3 years later, he's still just 21. Still could turn into just about anything. Live arm, maybe nothing. But the point is, the Royals gave him up to acquire Albert Abreu on June the 3rd. 18 days later, the Royals waived him. because in 4 appearances for the Royals, he walked 4 batters in 4 1/3 innings. He faced 22 batters, walked 4 of them. All right. And look, he had walked 12 batters in 8 2/3 innings for the Rangers before the trade. And before that, he had actually been a member of the New York Yankees. Before they had traded him right before the season. And he had pitched for them briefly in 2020 and then in 2021 walked 21 batters in 38 innings. And so, he's never shown command. But the point is, the Royals thought enough of his arm that they traded a prospect for him. 18 days later, gave up. The Yankees, who had traded him in April, and by the way, the Yankees traded him and in return got Jose Trevino, the catcher from the Rangers, who made the All-Star team, if I'm not mistaken. And then they go back and just claim the guy that they traded to get Jose Trevino. Well, you may have noticed that on Friday, Albert Abreu was the winning pitcher against the Kansas City Royals after he came in and threw, a scoreless inning. Today he threw an inning in 2/3, also scoreless, didn't walk anybody. And in 17 innings since rejoining the Yankees, he has allowed 2 runs. That's a 1.06 ERA, 13 hits, 17 strikeouts, and that's right, 4 walks. So as a member of the Royals, he walked 4 batters out of 22. He has faced 68 batters as a member of the Yankees and walked 4. His command has gone from awful to excellent. And sure, there's, statistical regression and the small sample size and all that, but that is not a fluky amount of improvement. That is very, very real improvement. Albert Abreu seems to be the pitcher the Royals thought they were trading for, but then let go because they had no idea how to fix his command issues. He went to New York and immediately fixed his command issues. And is quite likely that he will provide more value as a member of the New York Yankees than at least 1 and maybe 2 and perhaps all 3 of the guys that the Yankees just traded to get out Andrew Benintendi. So what is the point of the Royals trading for all these pitchers when they had a guy that they could not figure out who is already finding success at the major league level? I worry that the same thing could happen with these guys where they're never going to do much as a member of the Royals and they'll give up on them and they'll find success elsewhere. And on that note, whenever you're ready, we can reintroduce our favorite segment of the Kauffman Corner this season, the Jacob Junis Minute. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, we will. But it is, you are right. You have to be the team that finds the diamonds in the rough, the guys that are struggling elsewhere, and fixes them, not the ones that just pass them along. Let's do the Junis Minute right now because I think there are positives, right? And if anybody saw the preview tweet of what we're going to talk about today, Brady Singer is coming up, and that's going to be a positive. Drew Waters is coming up, a peek under the covers. That's going to be a positive. So I want to be clear that we're not just bashing and that the Royals aren't doing everything wrong, but this is the consistent theme of pitching is being able to be the one that gets a guy going in the right direction. They seem to really struggle with that. And Jacob Junis, who was pitching very well, or at least maybe he was kind of starting to come back to earth. Then he got hurt, right? But his back pitching
and yes, he was out for about a month with I believe it was a hamstring pull, which kind of derailed him a little bit. So the Giants brought him back and started him in the bullpen for 1 outing on July 17th, just getting his arm ready. He gave up 3 runs in 2 innings, gave up a home run, and so that raised his ERA. But then went back into the rotation on Monday and went on Monday 4 1/3 innings, allowed 3 hits, 1 walk, 1 run, and 2 strikeouts. And then took the mound again yesterday, and again only went 4 innings. They're working, building up his strength. He was up to 74 pitches, 4 shutout innings, 5 hits, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. He now has a 2.78 ERA on the season in 58 innings, 49 hits, 12 walks, 48 strikeouts. He has been worth 2.1 wins above replacement, according to Baseball Reference. We had talked about whether or not any Royal in the entire organization would have a better season by wins above replacement than the guy they literally released last winter. At the moment, the answer is yes, they do, because Brady Singer has been on quite a heater, and I think he's at 2.3 wins above replacement. But right now, Brady Singer is the only pitcher in the organization that's anywhere close to having the success Jake Junis is having. And Brady Singer has done it in 85 innings, whereas Jake Junis has thrown 58. And Brady Singer has barely been more valuable. So once again, guy the Royals released, immediately finding excellent amount of success with another organization. And he's not the only one this season. We now have two guys we can look at, we can point at and say, these are guys who found success the second they left the Royals organization and went to organizations with a reputation for maximizing the talents of their pitchers. Someone needs to be held accountable for that.
They do, and that's a point. I mean, I think there's not enough games left for anyone to justify no changes to the pitching part of the organization. I don't know how well you'd have to pitch, how many guys, and who all they'd be at what levels for the Royals organization to be able to say, no, we've got it all figured out, everything's going fine. And that's the one thing is I think that it's so undeniable that there will have to be changes on that pitching side, and we've seen them make them. Right on the hitting side, They made changes at that time on the pitching side as well. It just hasn't taken. So you'd like to believe that they will continue to say, okay, this isn't good enough. We're going in another direction. I want to go back to the trade for the 3 arms. So what would you like to have seen them do for Benintendi? Because I had a couple of people call this week on the radio show and say, I'd rather they get bats back, and because they can develop bats and then just get the bats and then use those bats to trade for proven big league pitching. And I get it, right? But it's kind of like the Kyler Murray contract, right? I'll make a football analogy here. When a contract gets negotiated and you're negotiating mandatory study time, independent study time into a contract, alarms should go off everywhere. One, the player should be like, oh no, that's a slap in my face. These contracts always get out. And so that'll be a slap in my face. I'm not going to put that in there. But more importantly, if you're the team that's insisting upon this, that, okay, we're going to give this guy all this money, but we got to make sure he's studying. I need this guy. Then you don't give this guy all the money, right? That's your check yourself moment. No. We're not giving him a contract, right? That's what has to happen. So what does that mean for the Royals? It means this. I love the idea. No, just trade for bats, and then trade them for proven big league pitching. When that becomes your plan, you're fired, right? Because
100%.
You have to be able to get talent of all kinds. You have to be able to develop it. If you're not developing it, you have to fire the people who aren't.
I 100% agree. I mean, as a short-term solution, trading for bats as opposed to arms, yes, that makes sense. And there are teams that have used that strategy to build a winner, both because they had difficulty developing pitching, but also because pitching by its nature is more difficult to develop than hitting. There is a strategy that just says, just focus on offense as player development, because if you have an excess of that, you can always trade for pitching. And I think of the Chicago Cubs, the way they built their World Championship team, drafting hitters in the first round and getting Javier Baez and Chris Bryant and Albert Abreu and I'm trying to think who else there was, and then trading for the pitchers or finding pitchers that had basically been given up on by other teams like Jake Arrieta, and they traded for Kyle Hendricks when he was a minor leaguer. So there is a strategy there, which says batters are just a safer option, certainly coming out of the draft. But the Cubs were able to do that in part because Jake Arrieta, the Orioles of 10 years ago, were kind of like the Royals were now, where they could not develop pitching for the life of them. And Jake Arrieta was an extremely talented pitcher, but had ERAs in the 5s until the Cubs got their hold of him. They were able to fix him. So ultimately, you have to have that ability to fix a pitcher at the major league level. So, yes, I could easily say I wish the Royals had traded for bats instead, and I think that would have been a good strategy. But the better strategy is trade for the 3 guys you traded for and then fire everybody who's involved in pitcher development this winter. Like, if I could choose between those two, I know which one I'm choosing. Like, I would go farther. I would say, I was saying this privately last winter, I would rather the Royals not spend a penny on free agent players this offseason and put that money into hiring the best pitching coaches available. That will return so much more value than spending $20 million on players. I mean, Zach Greinke making $13 million. I'm happy. I'm thrilled to have him here. You know, I think he's been a valuable member of the team. It's not enough to make a difference, but like, you could take a quarter of that money, and you would have. We've talked about how criminally little coaches in general make at the major league level. You could take a quarter of that money and have probably the highest paid coaching staff in all of baseball. What do you think is going to be more valuable? Like, we're seeing what a lack of pitching development has done. I think if Zach Greinke is worth 2 wins, 3 wins over a season, I honestly think revamping the pitching development in this organization could pay off 10 to 15 wins, almost overnight, within 2 years. And that's what I want. I mean, I feel like every week we find a new way to say the same thing, which is this organization's not going anywhere until they figure out how to develop pitchers, and that's going to involve firing a fair number of people. But the good news is, I think on the hitting side of things, they are continuing to show signs. We talk about that every week, that there are signs that they're developing hitters. And this week's example, we mentioned his name already, is Drew Waters. Yep. I think it's a good time to talk about him because it's hard to remember this. 2 weeks ago or whatever, 2.5 weeks ago, when they traded that draft pick for 3 guys, there was a fair amount of debate over who was the better prospect, Drew Waters or Andrew Hoffman. Right? Hoffman was a 12th round pick just last year, but really was a pop-up guy and was showing stuff in the minor leagues. I believe it's a Baseball America or MLB Pipeline. I don't have the numbers in front of me. One of them actually ranked Hoffman above Waters in the Royals organization immediately after the trade. And it's only been 2 weeks, and that already seems kind of crazy, and partly because Hoffman has gotten off to a slight, we just talked about his walk rate in Double-A. He has not gotten off to a great start, but it's really not about him. It's about Drew Waters and what Drew Waters has done. I really had no expectations he was going to dramatically improve as a hitter this season. I really felt like this was a guy you're trading for because you see the talent there, and you can work with him in the offseason, remake his swing, and you'll come out next year and be a really good player in AAA and maybe be ready for the majors. I did not expect them to be able to revamp his approach midseason, and maybe they haven't. Maybe this is all just a fluke or some other reason why he's hitting so well since he joined the organization. But the results we see from Drew Waters have got to be one of the most exciting developments, certainly the last month or so, in the Royals organization, because he has been kind of a monster in AAA. And if you guys are listening, if you were on Twitter on Tuesday night, you may have seen what Drew Waters was doing. One of the most impressive games you'll ever see from a minor leaguer. He homered and walked his first 2 times up in for the Storm Chasers, which is impressive enough, but happened to come against Jacob deGrom, who was rehabbing, and actually is back. That was his last rehab start before returning to the majors. So against one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, he homered and walked. After deGrom came out of the game, I believe he singled twice and walked. He also stole 3 bases in the game, which is even more impressive because the catcher for the Mets is the guy who is currently number 1 prospect in all of baseball, Francisco Alvarez. So homer off DeGrom, 3 steals off the best prospect in baseball. Oh, and he also made a highlight reel catch in the 8th inning in center field. I mean, it was just an absolute 5-tool display of talent. And then yesterday he went out and went 3 for 5 with 2 more home runs. He did go 0 for 4 today, but I'm pulling up his numbers here. Since joining the Royals organization, and we're talking about just 14 games, but he's hitting 340 with a 445. Here we go. I'll give you the exact numbers here. 346, 446 on base, 655 slugging, 1101 OPS, and 9 steals in 14 games. that is somebody who is in the span of 2 weeks has changed his place in the prospect firmament. I am quite excited about what we're seeing from him. And it's another lesson. Yeah, the Royals should trade for hitters because they seem to have a good handle on how to develop those guys, not so much on the pitching side.
Yeah, no, and this is a big one for it's a big one for saving jobs. I'm going to be honest with you because I've said it a couple of times. Like the Royals got to beat Keith Law, right? Like Keith can't keep being right. And I said there are a couple of ones. Make this, Keith didn't like the Drew Waters move. Keith didn't like Brady Singer, right? He said he's a reliever. That's what he really is. And a lot of other people didn't either. That's why he slid from being in contention for the number one overall pick to going where he went. There's a lot of other people that agreed. No, I don't see it. I said the Royals need to be right on this. And we'll get to Brady Singer next. But on Drew Waters, they're starting to look right. Right? And they're doing what we've said they can't do on pitching. And that's take a guy that everybody was down on, said, well, lots of tools, but can't put it together. It looked like the classic Royals acquisition. Oh, go get the guy that can win the combine competition, but can't win baseball games. And he's doing exactly the opposite. This is very big. And these are the kinds of things that needed to happen down the stretch. I think, frankly, to mute any talk of a change, I know fans are there, but I think within ownership, you have to have real positives when you stand in front, because those owners are going to have periodic meetings. And you have to be able to stand in front of them and point and say, okay, here's this success story. Here's that success story. And Drew Waters is one that they can really point to. Hey, we stole him for the 35th pick. There was no center fielder like this. And frankly, we always point back to somehow, is it the 2012 season, the 13th season, like everything's going to unfold in the exact order that it did in the past. But the one thing they did do was go find center field. Right? They found center field. They got shortstop taken care of. Right? We're starting to see those up the middle positions come together. If Drew Waters is going to hit like this, then he's going to be in the big leagues before long. And, hopefully this new hitting approach is not one where we're going, well, it's only been 1,200 at bats. Remember, you need 1,500 at bats before you really know what you got in a player. A phrase that has been is right at 1,500 where Moustakas turned the corner, and there's been some validity to it, but it's also entirely possible to prove yourself from the moment you get to the big leagues and hit the ground running, a la Salvador Perez, right?
You really don't have, if you're a player in the Royals organization, I promise you, you don't have to wait 1,500 at bats to perform. We will forgive you if you perform right out of the chute. It's okay.
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to oversell it. It's been 14 now, 15 games from Drew Waters, right? This might be a mirage. It might be, we might be overstating the degree of improvement, but it's not just the batting average, slugging average. It's also the plate discipline. I mean, you see the number up on the screen here. His 15% walk rate is double the rate in Atlanta. I was just about to say, in 15 games with Omaha, he's walked 10 times. He had 16 walks in 49 games for the Braves AAA affiliate.
But Tyler's right. 469 BABIP isn't going to keep up.
Probably not. But the power is also, 4 home runs in 15 games. This is a guy whose career high was 11. And one of the reasons why Keith Law never had, he was the one guy who did not ever rank Drew Waters as a top 100 prospect in the minor leagues when Baseball America, MLB Pipeline, and Baseball Prospectus all did, was he was too dependent on contact skills, right? Batting on balls in play, because he career high home runs 11, never had 50 walks in a season. Walks and power. It is honestly bizarre for me, and I'm sure for you, as somebody who has covered and been a fan of the Royals for decades, to be sitting here and talking about how a guy who, a prospect whose main weakness is that he doesn't walk enough and doesn't hit for enough power, is joining the Royals organization, and we are excited about the possibility that he might develop those skills because he's part of the Royals organization. Right. This is just uncharted territory for me. And it's very exciting. The idea that you come to the Royals to learn how to hit for power and to learn how to take pitches. If this is for real, this season will not have been in vain, believe me, because that is an incredible development. If you can take the Royals' natural predilection for athletes, as you talked about, like these toolsy guys, and actually teach them sort of the advanced hitting skills of don't swing at pitches you can't hit, and the ones that you can, you drive. That's a powerful combination. You give me a guy with athleticism and an elite approach to the plate. That is the kind of guy I want in my lineup.
Yes, I agree. How much do you believe in those numbers? Like, what would you say Drew Waters is going to be as the big leaguer?
Oh, I mean, God, that's 15 games. That's way too early to say what he will be. But I think if now he suddenly looks like a guy who can be a 15 to 20 home run guy, and let's say league average walk rate. I think all along the idea was that he would hit for a pretty good average. He's got the speed to leg out hits, and not an elite contact guy, but I think the speed alone was going to be a 280 hitter in the major league. So yeah, let's say 280, 15 home runs, 50 walks, and excellent speed. Again, 9 steals already in 15 games. He had 28 steals last year. He's probably a guy who could steal. And given that the Royals have him stealing more bases. I mean, he stole third base on the pitcher the other day, where that's something the Royals are really good at. Whit Merrifield is fantastic at picking those spots where the pitcher's not paying attention to you when you're on second base and stealing third. With the running Royals, I could see him being a 30 steal guy. I can definitely see, if you're a fantasy player, I could definitely see him being the kind of guy who helps you in a lot of fantasy categories. He's going to be a league average, maybe slightly above a league average hitter. That I think is a reasonable upside projection, which for the 35th pick in the draft, I don't want to overstate the last 2 weeks, but at the same time, if today the Braves offered that 35th pick back, and granted the draft's over and they pick the guy we may not pick, but the theory behind it back just for Drew Waters, I would say no. I would say today Drew Waters by himself is worth more than that pick. And then Andrew Hoffman at the time of the trade was considered really at Waters' caliber as a prospect. So it already appears to me that the value of that trade is lopsided.
Yeah, and then this is what the Royals have to do: win some trades,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know they say, "Oh, we want the trade to be good for both sides because you want the team to call you back." Listen, if a team is there to be fleeced, fleece them. That GM's getting fired anyway. You won't have to worry about him, taking his ball and going home and not being willing to talk to you. Your job is to build your ball club, and so which is I think the Royals would do if somebody offered them too much. They're not walking away from a no-brainer trade. They're going to make it happen. How about Brady Singer? 22 strikeouts in his last 2 starts, 13 innings, 22 strikeouts. This is gigantic for me because I think the Royals have put, they poo-poo strikeouts way too much. They're there to be had. Players are more willing to strike out. And by that, I mean, it used to be a horrible, you were shunned in your clubhouse. I cited on the radio the other day, I cited with Alec Lewis, Game of Thrones, the walk with the shame. That's what it was like when you took a big cut with 2 strikes on you and struck out. It's like, no, you choke up on the bat, you cut down your swing, you put the ball in play, right? That's what you do. And the game has realized, no, that's dumb. If guys can drive the ball, you look, pitch and location, and you try to drive the baseball regardless of the count. And with that will come some strikeouts. But when you do drive it for doubles, triples, homers, even, solid singles, we're going to be a better ball club. So that's how you go about doing it. Because of that, it is easier to strike guys out. Then the pitchers are better with the drive lines and the Rapsidos and all the different technologies that are there to help you really figure out your ultimate efficiency and to repeat your deliveries and everything. They're better at it. The Royals not striking people out is, to me, one of the things that is the most damaging for the front office. Not if they actually practice what they preach, not valuing the strikeout that's there. Jeff Passan said it. He said, the Royals won a World Series with a high contact team at the plate. They understood how important it was to put the ball in play. Then with their pitchers, they don't think it's important anymore, right? Like, it makes no sense. Right. But to see Brady Singer do this is a couple of things. One, he was a guy that didn't have a weapon for lefties. That was the knock on him coming out of the draft. That's why guys like Keith Law thought he would be a reliever. He's now doing that. He's now got weapons that get swing and misses. That the slider has gotten better. And I'd love to see some overlays of his early sliders. And is the slider really better? I think it probably is, because I have a theory that repetition makes everybody better, and it's no different with pitching. There's a reason why
especially against lefties. I'd be very curious to see if that slider, because he's throwing that slider down that almost hits the left-handed hitter in the foot, and they're
yeah,
swinging at it.
yeah,
And you know, you think about like Randy Johnson. You think about guys who rely on the sliders having trouble against batters on the opposite side, right? Brady Singer doesn't have a weapon against lefties. Nobody ever said that about Randy Johnson against right-handers, right? And he just had a fastball and slider, but he had that slider that would start like, outside the strike zone and end up like almost hitting the batter in the ankle. It was just absolutely unhittable. You couldn't lay off it. You couldn't hit it. And I mean, Brady Singer's slider is not that good, but we're seeing swings from batters where you're at the end of the after the pitch, you're like, why on earth would you swing at that? Because it almost hit you in the foot. But I've seen the overlay of his sinker and with his slider. There was an excellent example of this from his last start where literally they showed the previous pitch. It was a left-handed hitter who swung at a slider, almost hit him in the foot for strike 3. The previous pitch was a sinker because that slider looked like it was going to be inside the whole time it was coming to the plate. But the previous pitch was a sinker that had the exact same trajectory for like the first 40 feet and then cut back in and caught the inside corner. And so the batter was like, well, it looks like the same pitch. I have to swing at it. And it can be very embarrassing when you swing at a pitch that you think is going to move 18 inches inside, one way, and it goes 18 inches the other way. And I do think some of the reason for the effectiveness of that slider is the effectiveness of his sinker. Like the batters have to respect that pitch so much that they are swinging at pitches they may not otherwise do. But either way, I mean, his pitches are more refined, I think, now than they were 2 years ago.
and you've seen the overlays that there is more break, more distance, more.
I've not seen a comparison to previous years. That's I would like to see that as well. I'm just saying more an overlay of his pitches right now, his sinker and his slider.
I would like to see, has he just perfected that, or is it the changeup is being thrown enough that there's enough variance on what's going on that it's now heightened how those look, right? Like he's, it's the same pitches, but now there's at least enough just blur of other stuff, the changeup, to make it work. That's what I'd like to know. At the end
I'm
of the
not sure. Yeah, because 2 starts ago, I was going to say 2 starts ago, we talked about it at the last our last show. He threw like 11 changeups, and I think it was the fear of that. There wasn't a great changeup, but it was good enough they had to respect it. But what I thought was interesting, he went out this most recent time, had probably even a better outing, especially when you consider the opponent and the stadium. And he did end up throwing 6 or 7 changeups, I think, but I don't think he threw a single one until like the 3rd or 4th inning, and he was already just mowing down hitters. And that actually made me feel good that he can succeed with it and without it. Like the sinker and the slider are good enough on their own. He can sort of mix in the changeup as seasoned to taste, as much as he needs to. But I really do think he's the rare pitcher where those 2 pitches are so good, and they complement each other so well that he can be successful as a starting pitcher 3 times through a lineup with just those 2 pitches.
I want to highlight this. Todd said, and by the way, if you're catching us via the podcast later on, we do stream live 10 p.m. on Sundays and whenever there's momentous news, 10 p.m. on Sundays Central Time. So you can catch us on the stream and you can be part of the chat room, the conversation like Todd is here. He says, Soren seems to find all the negative angles in all their discussions. I think this vacation is very needed for him right now. And then Catman, the voice of reason, says, I don't think it's negativity. It's realistic. But I get Todd's point, and I appreciate that from both folks. I appreciate the ideas. I'm not trying to be negative on Singer. I genuinely want to know why if he's going to keep this up. And I don't think he's going to keep it up at 22 Ks per 13, right? Like that's not sustainable. It's like the BABIP we were talking about on Drew Waters. But if he is going to be a 10 or 11 K per 9 guy and move to the top of the rotation, I mean, it does start to look a lot better. Like I said, Waters, an ace on the mound, Bobby Witt Jr. at short, all these things. It's starting to be like, okay, now, we were saying early in the year, can you squint and see it? I mean, some of these things, if it's coming around, I don't know that you got to squint. So I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to understand why he's being ineffective, because he didn't want to throw the changeup, and he's not throwing it that much. And so I do think it's of note. Is this another guy who, has had the Royals trying to mess with him, and he's listened someplace else and he's having success, or is this the Royals doing? I think for us, it's intriguing as analysts and fans to understand. But for the Royals, it's very important to understand why he's good, why he's gotten better. If there's consistency there, why he's getting the swing and miss, so that they can go replicate that with other people. It's not a negativity when it comes to Singer. I'm thrilled. He's striking guys out. It's what I want all their pitchers to do. So I'm tickled that this is happening, but I think it's important to know why it's happening so that they can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I look, I think Singer is one of the absolute success stories for the Royals, not just in terms of his performance, but in the whole sort of thought process that went into him being a Royal. I mean, you mentioned it, like going into that 2018 draft, there was talk of him being a top 5 guy absolutely. And I'm still sort of befuddled as to how he fell to 18. We all thought, gee, maybe the Royals worked out, like, they got him to fall to 18 by offering him a ridiculous amount of money. And we just saw that with Cam Collier. We were wondering how the hell he fell to, I think, actually 18th as well. And the Reds gave him $5 million. The Royals didn't give Singer like way above slot money. And I don't think that they had some sort of like arrangement with him. I don't think they went into that draft necessarily expecting him to fall to them. But because of the lack of third pitch, there was a lot of skepticism that Brady Singer's stuff would work as a starter at the major league level. The Royals didn't overthink it and realized this is a guy who, the 2 pitches that he does throw are so good quality that there was a lot of talk of him being a top 5 guy. That's too much value to ignore at this point in the draft. And I think he has absolutely lived up to his billing as a guy where, yes, the third pitch may always be an issue, but the 2 pitches that they thought they were getting absolutely are there. And when you think about, that transition from college pitcher to major league pitcher, and how many guys, including other guys in that same draft that the Royals took, who have struggled to make that transition. I think Brady Singer deserves a ton of credit for the fact that those 2 pitches do play at the major league level, and also sort of all the quote unquote intangibles that Brady Singer was thought to have: his competitiveness on the mound, the fiery nature, his desire to win at all costs. I think we've seen that in a good way. I mean, this is a guy who, has at least, he has fought to at least being a league average pitcher from his first day in the major leagues. I mean, he jumped straight to the majors in 2020, after the long pandemic layoff. And even without a third pitch, he was a guy who never gave in to hitters. He has very good command, and that allows you to, not throw a cookie to a guy just because you're behind in the count 3-1. He's always thrown a decent amount of strikes, especially for a guy in this organization. So I like the pitcher Brady Singer has become. I don't think he's a number 1. He may never be a number 1, but I think he could be the quintessential number 2 starter. A guy who absolutely can start a playoff game for you, an above average guy, maybe not a true ace, but you'll take that anytime in the draft. And I think what's interesting about Singer is, I think your colleague at 810, Jason Anderson, reported that according to his contacts in the organization, we talked about the question of whether or not the Royals had gained another year of service time for Brady Singer during his time in Omaha earlier this season. And according to his contacts, they did. And Brady Singer's free agency has been delayed. So he is actually under contract for 3 more? No, 4 more years after this one. That 4th year.
No. This one and 3 more.
Hold on.
2021. This is 22, which is not going to count as a full year.
Right. So exactly 4 more years. Yeah, because this is his 30th season in the majors. He will not have 3 years of service time. He'll have 2.16.
Okay, you're right.
So it's actually 4 years, which basically, so in other words, he's 25 years old right now, or I guess he turns 26 in a few days, but this is his age 25 season. The Royals will have him for his age 26, 27, 28, and now age 29 seasons. The need for a long-term contract is probably minimized for that reason. You can certainly wait at least 1 more year to see exactly what it becomes. But you have him through his 20s, and that's, I think I'm certainly a lot more optimistic about the Royals being contenders in 2026 than I am for, let's say, next year. So I think that's actually a very significant development for the Royals, that they're going to have this guy around, and he's been quite durable. And yeah, I mean, he's the most valuable pitcher, I think, in the entire organization right now. I don't think it's particularly close.
Let's talk about this to wrap things up. Witt, Taylor, Greinke, Barlow, Keller, who goes, who stays on the Braves have been linked to Michael A. Taylor. That's the one that gets a lot easier. I even before Waters was performing, that's the one I wanted to see, because it was a sign that not only did they get good return, and I think they ought to get good return because there's another year on his contract if you move Michael A. Taylor, but also it shows confidence in yourself. It means that this isn't just a series of flukes. We think we've got the hitting thing figured out. We can go recreate a Michael A. Taylor. Now with Drew Waters looking like he is knocking on the door of being ready for the big leagues, it gets really easy. There's no reason for Michael A. Taylor to be on this ball club come August 3rd, is there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be quite the flex by the Royals if they traded Michael A. Taylor to the Braves, and the reason they felt comfortable trading Michael A. Taylor is because they had just acquired Drew Waters from the Braves and felt that he was actually ready for the major leagues this season. Like, I was not expecting to see Drew Waters this year based on the way he's hitting. I mean, like you said, if they trade Taylor, it is, you and I are, we've seen our confidence in Drew Waters raised by his numbers, but we're just analyzing him statistically. If the Royals trade Taylor and bring up Waters, that is a tremendous vote of confidence from the organization that they have seen what they have seen from him since joining the team, and they like what they see. I think that would be excellent. I mean, if we're up to me, Zach Greinke, I don't think he's going to be traded, and I don't think he should. I mean, I don't want to say he shouldn't, but frankly, for the amount that you would get for Zach Greinke, what's the point? I honestly, there is the fan side of me that's like, if you told me that his start today is the last start he'll ever make as a member of the Royals, that would make me quite sad. And I think he's happy to be here. We saw him, on the TV broadcast, like talking with his wife and three sons that were sitting in the seats and just kind of enjoying the game. And I think that's a big part of why he came back to Kansas City, and he bought a house here. Like, the Royals will know this better than you and I, but I think there's a chance that Zach Greinke at this point in his career values things more than money, and perhaps even more than winning, or at least winning in the short term. Like, I think he likes the potential to win something in Kansas City where he started. And in the meantime, it's a great place for him to raise his kids during the season and for them to watch their dad play Major League Baseball. I want to root for that story. That is a great story above and beyond just being an athlete or being a sports story. So I don't want to see Greinke traded. I'd be shocked if he was. But if it were up to me, all four of those other guys would be gone. Witt, Taylor, Barlow, Keller. I'd try and throw Hunter Dozier in there if I could. Who do I actually think will be traded? I think Witt will probably be traded. I just think that his skill set and
With being Whit Merrifield.
Whit Merrifield, yeah. I do not. If Bobby Witt gets traded, we there will be an emergency 7-hour podcast. I can guarantee that. But no, Whit Merrifield will almost certainly be traded, just because I think the skill set, the fact that he can play second base and the outfield, the number of teams looking, and I think the Royals are now more realistic about what his value is. I think there's a trade there. I don't have confidence in any other player. I wouldn't give more than 50-50 odds that any other player individually will be traded. I'm hopeful at least one of them will. If they trade Witt and trade someone else, I imagine that then I think that's a satisfactory deadline. But, I've been disappointed by the Royals before. So
I think Whit Merrifield's traded. I think Scott Barlow's traded. I think
that would be, if they trade Barlow, that would actually be very, a really good sign, because I do think with the club control, he could bring back more than, Keller potentially. And I mean, I don't know. Michael A. Taylor would be a lot of value right now. So there's an avenue here for the Royals to actually get a lot of minor league depth from these guys who really don't have a ton of value for them beyond next year. And frankly, I think they're still 1 year away from considering contention. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but we'll see what they do.
Don't you see Michael Taylor in center and Waters in left with them? They love their shortstops everywhere on the infield coming into this year. That was the big plan. They love their defense. They love their defense. And don't get me wrong, I'd like to be great defensively, but hitting the ball over the wall is what wins games. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I can see them rolling out, Mondesi back at short, Witt Jr. at third, Nicky at second, Drew Waters in left. We got nothing but shortstops and center fielders all over the diamond.
Well, that's what we thought going into the season, at least on the infield. We were like, they got a shortstop at third, a shortstop at shortstop, and a shortstop at second base. How did that work out for them?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
I agree.
They got to make it work out when it's all said and done. Worked out tonight. One technical glitch early on. I appreciate everybody with their patience on that one. Remember, we stream live if you're catching us via the podcast on Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Central Time. If you would subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the stream there on the YouTube. Hit the like, hit the love button. Don't cost nothing, but it helps us out immensely. And so we will see what happens with the trade deadline. Not sure when we're coming at you next. Certainly, it'll be soon here at the Kauffman Corner podcast. But as I know, Rany's got a trip that'll change even more time zones. So it'll be a little bit different.
Speaking of needing a vacation, I think my negativity, I think I need to reset myself.
Exactly. But thank you very much for joining us here on Kauffman Corner. Back at it very soon. Make sure you hit the subscribe. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. We will see you soon here on Kauffman Corner.